All right. Well, good morning again. So I don't have that cold that I had last time, but I still have a cough. So I hope that didn't happen during this session. I went to the pharmacist and I said, so, what can I take for this cough? He said, he was coughing. And he said, nothing. He said, it just has to run its course. So let's let it run. So anyway, this talk's going to be a little bit longer today. There's a lot of stuff we got to go over. So if you get sleepy, just raise your hand. The ushers will bring you a blankie and a pillow. Right? So, we're beginning Lent. And this past Wednesday, we had a great Lent Ash Wednesday service, or I should say session. It was kind of an all-day prayer session. And this is a season for fasting and prayer and repentance. And, in our past religious experiences, and maybe some of us still do it, we would give up something for Lent, But what quite didn't make sense is that we would go right back to that vice when the 40 days were over with great anticipation of joy of now I can do this again, right? And if you think about the fact that repentance means remorse from past conduct, it doesn't really make sense, this whole point of just giving it up for 40 days only to go back to it, okay? So the idea of the spiritual process is to resurrect into a new state of consciousness free from old addictions, habits, and negative thought behavior patterns. So it's not giving up something you enjoy and going right back to it that Lent is all about. The spiritual process is about giving up something that is interfering with your spiritual growth, something you're willing to let go of and never return to again. Okay? It's interesting, too, in the daily word, the prayer, many things we did this morning already. We're talking about the process of moving to another state of consciousness, letting go and moving on. So metaphysically, the Lenten season is a time to abstain from negative thoughts, words, and actions. It's a time to rest in the peaceful, prayerful consciousness of spirit and turn your mind from believing that the conditions or situations or events that are going on in your life have power over you. Okay? Just before I came in this morning, I was reading another Richard Rohr book. How many people heard of Richard Rohr? He's a Franciscan priest who has a whole metaphysical thought process, and he was talking about a mystic is one who can look at an event but see the whole. See, what we have to do is we look at an event and we're stuck in the event. But a mystic has the ability to look at this event and know sort of the whole dynamic that it encompasses. So that's sort of the process of Lent, is to let go of those thought processes that have us stuck and focused in just one little thing. This is going on in my life, and I'm struggling with it. So from a unity perspective, Lent is a time to put God back in charge of your life and affairs. All right? It's a time to cleanse yourself of all the thoughts and beliefs and fears and opinions that keep you from awakening to the truth of who you really are, who we really are. It's a time to allow your light of divine love and spiritual understanding to shine from you and into the life of others. That's kind of the idea of Lent. And again, reading a Richard Rohr book just before I came in here this morning, he was talking about a woman, a mystic, and I can't remember her name, who was on a subway train packed. If you've ever been in New York City on a packed subway train. And she said, all of a sudden, she saw everybody as the Christ. And she realized that it was not a bunch of separate people, all the different nationalities and colors and everything, but it was all one idea, which was the Christ. And then when she came out of the subway, she was walking down the street. If you've ever been on the streets of Manhattan, and all the people that were passing, she said she could see the Christ in every one of them. And she said she held on that for a while, and then it passed. Right? And then now she's struggling to try to get back to that state of mind where she sees everybody as the Christ. That's sort of the idea. Okay, so this time, like I said, cleansing ourselves of all the thoughts, fears, opinions that keep us from awakening to the truth of ourselves. That's sort of the concept, because right now we can't see the Christ in each other because we really can't see the Christ in ourselves. All right, and so these are the common metaphysical thoughts about Lent. What we are going to explore in this and upcoming Lent lessons is some of the ways we can fine-tune our spiritual quest by seeking understanding more of how the common everyday things in our lives are trying to sabotage our spiritual growth because we get caught up in them instead of being more open and receptive. All right. So the theme of this lesson, or these lessons, is Lent, the path to awakening. And this indicates a willingness on our part to be open and receptive to our inner guidance that transcends our own perception of where we think our life path should be going. Okay, so we all have this thought about where we're moving. And the key here is to understand that, yes, we may have goals and objectives and things we're trying to get to, but in truth, what we're trying to do is awaken to the truth of ourselves. Who am I really? Okay, now listen to this poem that explains that we're always being called by God to a higher purpose. Right? So something happens in your life, usually caught in that little thing that's happening, but that little thing that's happening really is a call from God to move to a higher state of consciousness. Okay? Remember, we can never solve a problem if we stay at the level of the consciousness of the problem. You can only solve it by moving to a higher state, and then you see the problem from a whole different perspective, or you don't even see the problem at all. Okay? So listen to this. This is a poem. Listen, my beloved, I am calling you. Do you hear me? I'm calling you to come higher. I'm urging you ever onward and upward in your understanding and in your relationship with me. I'm calling you as you sit in the stillness of prayer and when you're working, resting, or playing. When you listen, you will hear me. You will hear me in the voice of a loved one, in the laughter of a child, in the tears of one who is grieving. I'm in the rustling of the leaves, in the breeze, the glory of the setting sun, the mystery of the stars. What are you seeking? Happiness, peace, health, joy? What will satisfy your soul? Ask, seek, find. Look for your good in my love, my life, my abundance. I'm the answer to every question of your heart. I'm the fulfillment of your dreams. I am calling you. Come to me, my beloved. You know, and that's sort of the concept. Now, we've quoted many times Matthew 22:14, for many are called, but few are chosen. And we've interpreted that as many are called, but few choose. Okay, the idea being that God is constantly calling us and choosing us to partake in the abundance of joy and love that exists in the universe as our potential waiting to be activated. And there's no time or circumstance in which you would find yourself that God is not choosing you. Okay, we all know the verse in Matthew 4:45. It says, Matthew 5:45. God makes the sun shine on the evil and on the good, sends rain on the just and the unjust. Now, if you look at the Message Bible, I don't know if you've ever seen the Message Bible, it's more of a modern interpretation. It says, God gives us his best, the sun to warm and the rain to nourish, to everyone regardless of whether you are good or bad, nice or nasty. All right? So if this verse rules out God not choosing us, then in our time of need, it is we who are not choosing God. And basically what that looks like is, stuff happens, we jump right into a fear mode, and when you're in that fear mode, you're not choosing God. You get the idea? So the key here is we have to assume that our not choosing God is something that we're not doing consciously. In other words, we're not consciously saying, I'm not going to choose God. The ego has a way of reacting to the world. You get what I'm saying? We have all these built-in fears. And remember, we might say, I fear this. And you're not really fearing this is happening in a moment. You have a history of fear that is reacting. This thing is a hot button to strike that history of fear. You get what I'm saying? So, the key is that we're never saying to ourselves, I'm not going to choose God. Rather, it is has to do with our not understanding how the process of choosing God actually works. So as the poem says, listen, my beloved, I am calling, do you hear me? Words such as these, for us really create a mental quandary, wondering, well, how do I hear God calling? You get it? Your mind says, well, how do I hear God calling? How do I choose God over what I'm thinking, worrying about, or fearing in terms of what is going to occur in my life? So all those things that we do all the time that come from fear, if now you're saying, okay, well, but God is calling me, but all I can hear is what's disturbing me, what's bothering me, what's upsetting me. Does that make sense? Okay, so it's sort of like, how do I hear that over my own ego noise? So Reb Zellman, one of the founders of the Jewish renewal movement, shares his experience of answering this question, how do you know that God is speaking to you? He said, it is not necessary for God to move air against my eardrum. It's not like, us speaking to each other. In other words, it's not something that one hears as we hear each other, but Reb Zellman says it's hard to explain because we have good reason words. This is the reason why. We're good at that. Somebody, why are you doing that? We're good at with reason words, okay? But we hardly have any intuition words, okay? So if someone says, how do you know that it's God speaking to you? Since it is an intuitive experience, you have no intuitive words to explain the experience. You get me? I mean, if something happens to you, my leg is hurting or I got this cough or whatever's going on, well, we have reason words before that. But when we feel spirit talking to us and we get caught up in that, somebody says, well, what's going on? We have no intuition words to explain that. Okay, so we'll say things like, let me say, intuition is immediate cognition. It's a sense of something not evident or deducible, meaning you can't reach it by reasoning. And intuition is something that is impressed upon you. Everyone in this room has had moments of enlightenment. Something was impressed upon you. You were going to do this, but all of a sudden you felt that you needed to do this. And somebody says, why? And you go, I don't know. Or how did you come up with that idea? I don't know. It just came to me. So everyone, have we all had that? So the key here is, how do I open myself up to that all the time? Okay? In other words, I want to do this, but I feel this other energy that's trying to give me another message, right? How do I just do that? How I just let myself be? So as Reb Zellman says, we cling to reason words because it gives us an out, a justification or rationale that others can relate to. See, so when I explain it to you, you kind of go, oh, yeah, I get that, okay? And we choose the reasoning of our ego mind over the faith of our spiritual mind because it is so much more eloquent, so flamboyant, so colorful, so convincing, right? So if I get intuition, if I feel spirit kind of talking to me, you say, what's going on? I really can't do anything that's going to impress you. But my reasoning ego mind can say stuff that you'll be impressed, and don't let me have a title like, doctor or PhD or something. Then you're really impressed, okay? And that's the dynamic. So, we want to be impressive. We want to be flamboyant. But just to say, I don't know, it just came to me. People go, what? I mean, you know what I'm saying? That's just not interesting. You get what I'm saying? So Joan Boroshenko, who wrote the book Your Soul's Compass, she said, evaluating life according to external success is a particularly Western materialistic preoccupation. Like at the school, people want to be called Dr. So-and-so. It's a thing. You know what I'm saying? And it's a natural thing for us. When we hear titles and things like that, we're impressed by that, okay? And she said, but that's a Western materialistic preoccupation. In other words, we feel we need eloquent words and mannerisms to express our accomplishments and our feelings and emotions that in a way will mesmerize our listener. They're like, oh, yeah, I get it, okay? All right? But trying to explain an inner story of spiritual transformation, of how you have been touched by the grace of God, and how you have felt God moving in the circumstances and situations in your life, as Dr. Boroshenko says, this is life's artistry, meaning it is spirit painting some experience, some guidance into your life that's beyond explanation. Isn't that powerful? Okay. So now how many of you seen the Grand Canyon? Who's been to the Grand Canyon? Okay. So you drive up to the Grand Canyon, you're in the parking lot, and you walk up, and all of a sudden, there it is. Who's had their breath just taken away? You're just like mind blown. Last week when Pam and I were in Vegas, we don't spend much time in Vegas. We like to go outside. And we went to the Valley of Fire, right? And so we're driving, and I'm saying to Pam, well, this just looks like, what's the other place we go? Red Rock Canyon. I mean, didn't look too much different. And all of a sudden, because we drive into the park, and you got to drive and drive and drive and drive, all of a sudden we hit the red rocks, the beauty of we were in the Valley of Fire. I mean, these rocks were just, anybody been there in the Valley of Fire? It's incredible, isn't it? And then we drove a little bit, and we stopped, and I got out to take some pictures and photos, and I saw all these hikers, and these hikers were older than we were, with, the walking things, So I went by the car, I said, Pam, we got to hike. These folks are older than we are, right? So we hiked up in there, and, as you go in there, you see Indian carvings and stuff, but the photo opportunities were just incredible, okay? So even with me telling you this, if you have not been there, you only have a vague idea of what it's like. You get what I'm saying? Okay. So the key, though, is I lost my place again, hon. So this is similar to trying to explain to someone what you're feeling as God paints a new direction for your life into your mind and heart. See, because it's not your intellectual mind saying, this is the route I'm going. Okay. You're trying to figure out, I got, sequentially, I can see I'm going to get to this goal. But then God starts painting this direction into your mind and heart that's very different from what you're thinking, okay? And, so often you can't say much more about it's a feeling I have that it's just right for me to do this. Is everybody getting it? Okay? So which one I want to get to is that feeling that you get that you can't really rationalize a lot of times is spirit trying to paint a new direction within your heart, okay? And how do you know that it's God painting the picture and not your ego? It's when the colors in the spiritual palette are made up of faith, love, wisdom, understanding, joy, forgiveness, compassion, kindness, patience, wisdom, strength, and courage. This is the paint that God uses. You get it? Okay? And just think about how you communicate with others during times of stress and how you communicate with yourself when you're absorbed with your own thoughts about the challenges in your life. What pictures do you paint and what colorful emotions do you use to paint those pictures? Are you using fear and anguish and worry? And you get what I'm saying? And so when you find yourself doing, you got to say, so wait a minute. I'm not painting the picture that I want to paint. All right, this is a picture I always paint, but I don't want to paint this picture anymore. I don't want to just be still and let God paint within me, okay? And we become so good at painting the picture of our interpretation of what we think is occurring in our lives that our inner canvas is filled with our own imaginings. Now, this offers another interpretation of there's no room in the inn for the birth of the Christ child. And again, if you had not heard me say this before, and for listeners on the internet, it says very specifically, when Joseph and Mary, wisdom and love, showed up at the inn, it says in Scripture, there was no room for them. There was no room for wisdom. There was no room for love. There was no room for the birth of the Christ. There was plenty of room if they had, going on, and then anger and frustration had knocked on the door. Oh, yeah, come on, we got room for you. You get it? Okay? So if you're filling your own self up, you're painting these pictures all in your head, Spirit comes along and says, well, can I have a little spot here somewhere to paint something? All right? So the purpose of our daily prayer and meditation is to erase some of what you have painted on the canvas of your mind to make room for God to paint an image or two. Okay? And the purpose of Lent is not so much about letting go of eating something or drinking something or doing something on a physical level. If you want to do those things, okay, it's fine. It doesn't hurt. So if you give up chocolate or sweets or whatever it is you give up for the 40, it's fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with doing those rituals if you want to do them. It might be good for your overall well-being. However, Paul said in 1 Corinthians 13:11, when I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. But when I became an adult, I gave up childish ways. And there's a reason for that verse. So many of our practices and rituals do not really propel us to the next level of spiritual understanding that we say we want. In so many ways, we are still children dreaming about being spiritual when we grow up. All right? So, just before this verse, in 1 Corinthians 13:9, Paul said, "For our knowledge is imperfect, and our prophecy is imperfect." I don't care how many degrees we have or what we think we know. It's just like, again, maybe you heard me, Einstein said that our technology is outrunning, pacing our humanity. I look for it today that our humanity outpaces our technology. All right? And so it's sort of that idea, because right now, what we think we know is imperfect. All right? And our prophecy is imperfect. But when the perfect comes, the imperfect will pass away. The imperfect, of course, is our ego mind with all of its perceptions about what is right and wrong, good and evil. While the perfect is God, the one God, is calling us to listen for divine guidance. So when your mind goes right to that space of, oh, that's not good, you want to be still. Okay? Now, the key here is we have a lot of reason words for why this or that is good, bad, evil. You get what I'm saying? But we need some intuition words. We need to become more like mystics to be open to what is the greater picture going on here. Is that making sense? Okay? But as we said earlier, we have plenty of vocabulary words to express our knowledge and our own prophecy, but very few words to express the intuition experience of God. Among some mystics, this intuition experience is called the teaching that happens inside. All right? So when you become still about a matter that's going on in your life, there's a teaching that will happen inside. So as always, the question is, well, how do I experience this spiritual guidance, this spiritual teaching, this state of oneness with God? Well, spiritual teacher Hamed Ali talks about this divine guidance from God as an experience of non-dual awareness. Now, we deal in a mindset of duality. Everything to us is good or bad, right or wrong, right? Pretty or ugly, okay? But he says, yeah, this is the experience of non-dual awareness. Non-duality is a state of mind that can be experienced, but is impossible to put into words. Right now in our minds, we believe we are separate from everyone and everything else. There is me and you, them and us, which is the force behind the expression, you people. Right? And those people, which right away says, oh, they're wrong, I'm right. Okay? That what we want to try to get to, we're not going to stop doing that, but we at least want to get to a space where we say, even that's how I feel, that is not where I want to be. Okay? So, but he goes on to say, but at a spiritual level of consciousness, we come to realize that we are not two, but one. When does this happen, or how does this happen? As soon as we stop identifying our emotions and thoughts and perceptions that separate us, we rise above the superficial sense of separateness and suddenly realize we are one. So they said that Jesus taught the mathematics that 1 + 1 equals 1. All right? Now, not just one with each other, but one with the universal, omnipresent consciousness we call God. I gave the 7 levels of consciousness in class the other day, and I didn't really mean to get to the top one, but they were bugging me. So, it's tribal or herd, the collective unconscious, race consciousness, individual consciousness, self-consciousness. And I stopped there because it was relating to a point that we were talking about from a marketing perspective. And I asked them, which one of these do you think marketing aims at? So one of them goes, well, what's the next level? So I said, well, it's not really for this class, but the next level is spiritual consciousness, right? And then they really pressed it. Okay, well, what's the next level? Okay, Of course, the next level is Christ. I said Christ consciousness, Buddha consciousness, Krishna consciousness, Muhammad, any of these high mystics. And, these kids are really open to wanting to know more about this. So anyway, we talked about that concept of getting to this point where we are moving out of certain dynamics in terms of where our mind is. But at the same time, I was thinking later that even when we hit the level of quote-unquote spiritual consciousness, we still are in parts of us in every other level below that. There's certain things we're just going to do because the herd does it. You follow me? Because everybody does it. There's a collective unconscious, which means that we are collectively tied together in a way that we're just unconscious of. So it takes a while to wake. So that's why when they say, you've heard me say there are only two people in history that we know of, but if you read the works of Paramahansa Yogananda and some of the other Eastern masters, you will know that people in India reach these levels all the time. Okay? But, for us, all we know is Buddha, who did it 3,000 years before Jesus, and Jesus, who awoke and says, I'm awake. I'm awake. So at that level, you're disconnected from all those levels below you because they're all what? An illusion. See, right now where we are, we can't even perceive that it's an illusion. It's like that not Star Wars, but the other, Star Trek series where these big-headed creatures, had the captain and his men, and these things are coming after him, and they said, we know that this is an illusion. Those, big-headed, highly evolved creatures are making us believe that this is happening. And they said, yes, but if we don't fight that creature that's coming at us, it will kill us, even though it's an illusion. You get what I'm saying? So those things in your life that you're struggling with, even though we are saying they're an illusion, you got to deal with them at the level that you're at. Does that make sense? Okay? So what we're doing is we're learning things that can get us to a higher level, but right now we have to function where we are. Okay? So, not just one, so we're not just one with each other, but we're one with this whole universal, that's what I was getting at. Excuse me. So I said about, there's three Africans. They talked about, the three Africans in the class, young students. And I said, so I talked about Christ and Buddha and all. I said, and the indigenous people are very much connected to the earth. So I said to them, in your country, don't you have the indigenous people that are very much connected to the earth? Well, see, they're from Africa, but they're very modernized, and they're going, no, we don't. I said, no. I said, I know that the indigenous people have a close connection to the earth. So one of them, Ayo, says, yeah. He says there are many traditions like that. And the other Belters looks and says, really? Right? But I was just trying to get the point across to the class that all of these concepts are important of understanding that we're connected to everything that happens, all right? So again, Nina Zimmelman, who has an exceptional intuitive capacity, tells us how she makes a distinction between spiritual guidance and intuition. Now, do you guys know what a spiritual intuit is? What's the place down on Virginia Beach? Edgar Casey. So Edgar Casey was a spiritual intuit. He's a scientifically proven spiritual intuit. There are thousands and thousands of, in other words, people would come and sit in front of him. He would go into a trance, and he could tell you medically what was going on with you. Okay, but there are thousands of documented cases for him. You can go down to Virginia Beach to the Edgar Casey Society and read all about this. So there are other spiritual intuits. And so Nina Zellberman, she says, when I use my intuition, I go to a place of wisdom and use this ability, but when I experience guidance, true wisdom comes to me. Now, let me say it again so you get it. When I use my intuition, I go to a place of wisdom and use this ability. But when I experience guidance, true wisdom comes to me. I don't go looking for it. It accesses me. I have access to intuition. There's a difference in the feeling, the experience. I use my intuition like others use their thought patterns and brains. Often I work as a medical intuitive. And I go to this place in me that's wise and from there I can experience more than the usual information, okay? However, spiritual guidance, see, she's making a distinction between intuition and guidance. Spiritual guidance accesses me. It is a different feeling. I don't initiate it. It initiates it. It is initiated by some embodiment of wisdom that says, pay attention. Intuition is just an ability I have. I use it. However, guidance uses me. Obviously, the greater wisdom that is my guidance is a greater part of me that is steering me into directions I am resisting going to. Okay, so now we don't basically use our intuition, but we have intuition. Now, a spiritual intuitive, they have the ability to access that intuition whenever they need it. Okay, but she's making a distinction between that and spiritual guidance. She says, I can access intuition, but I cannot access spiritual guidance. It accesses me. That's powerful, okay? And she said, so anyway, this is a great explanation. However, spiritual God explanation. So this is a great explanation. All of us have intuitive abilities. Some may be more aware of your intuition than others. So the key here really is just paying attention. You know what I'm saying? You know, when we're all upset or riled up about something or excited about something, you know, you're either, you know, fear or even love wrapped up in something. Any of those can block you from getting that spiritual guidance. So that's why whenever you get information, go back to Joy put it up on the website. Go back to the thing about the farmer. You know, is this good or is this bad? He just goes, I don't know. It just is. All right. So is this exciting? Is it not exciting? I don't know. It just is. So it's sort of getting into that space, all right? And this study that I'm doing on the Bhagavad Gita takes it to a whole nother level, you know, in terms of understanding this idea of not being sucked in all the time to what is happening out here, all right? But anyway, you know, you'll especially find yourself being very intuitive in your area of specialty, right? So if you have an area of specialty, you just come up with ideas all the time in that area, all right? And on those things you have a passion about, or maybe when it comes to your children or things like that, you have intuition. You know, husband and wives have intuition, or you know, or people in close couples have intuition. You know what I'm getting? You know, you just can intuit what your mate may want or not want. So we all experience it. It's a profound knowing that was undisputable and often unexplainable in terms of what's happening inside of us. So even though we do not have the reputation of Nina or other intuits like Carolyn Mays, anybody know Carolyn Mays? She used to come here, all right, at one time. Carolyn Mays or other intuits, you know, we are intuits in our own right, all right? We can access that information. But where intuition is something we have consciously or unconsciously learned how to access to help us in our daily lives, Nina is explaining a spiritual experience we cannot access and use. All we can do is learn how to become still, surrender, and allow it to access and use us. Lord, say it with me, make me an instrument of thy peace. Doesn't that make sense? Okay? Now, the reason words, doesn't that make sense? Okay? And again, the meaning of the song 46:10, be still and know that I am God. And this can be paraphrased as be still and allow me to access and paint a new direction in your mind. Okay, you guys still with me? All right. Now, Exodus 3:11 is an example of what Nina was referring to when she said, Exodus 3:11, for those taking notes. She said, obviously the greater wisdom that is my guidance is a greater part of me that's steering me into directions I'm resisting going to. Now in scripture written in Exodus, Moses says to God, well, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? Okay? Now in the scripture, Moses is reflecting what we experience when God demands our attention and points us in directions that every fiber of our being is resisting. Okay? Now listen to Moses in Exodus 4:1. But suppose they do not believe me. In Exodus 6:30. Since I am a poor speaker, why should Pharaoh listen to me? Now we don't say these exact same words, but when we're getting this guidance to do something, and we find ourselves resisting it, and we resist it because spiritual guidance is going to take us in a direction we would not normally go on our own. Does that make sense? Okay? But, you find it amazing that characters in the Bible that lived thousands of years ago are struggling with the situations that we're still struggling with today. Why? Because we still are not listening. We're not open and receptive to this divine process that's trying to unfold within us. So what is our part in this? That also has not changed. It is still our main spiritual work to learn how to just be still and listen. Okay? Moses heard God speaking to him because he had spent a long time in the wilderness, 40 years, thinking about and searching for the true meaning and purpose of his life. He knew he could no longer go back to what he was, but he did not know where he was supposed to be, so he was in the wilderness. How many people here have ever had a wilderness experience or are having a wilderness experience? Okay? All right? But let me just tell you, the wilderness is a wonderful place to be. If Moses, the two greatest figures we know of, Moses and Jesus, spent time in the wilderness, it's a time to just be. Okay? So spiritually, the wilderness is a wonderful place. And, if you find yourself in there, just slow down and let the process happen. You are now, being in the wilderness means you are ripe for spiritual guidance. Because you've at the end of your intellect, I just don't know what to do. You are ripe for spiritual guidance. Just be still and listen. So I'm going to leave you with this affirmation to think about. I release any feelings of doubt and resistance, and I willingly align myself with God's plan for me. With faith, I follow God's guidance and expect wonderful results. Amen.